Well, good morning. Somebody said, "You sure don't look like a preacher." Maybe that's because you don't know what a preacher really looks like. I really doesn't matter to me if you know who I am. But what matters to me is that you know whose I am, because that's what's important. And I didn't want to share this message today or any other day, really. Shared it at the prisons, parts of it, because there's a lot of painful roads. But God said, "Would you do it for me?" And I want to be willing to do anything that He asked me to do, because He's been so good to me and so merciful to me. And I said, yes, I will. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about bits and pieces and the one that made me whole. And it's nobody else could share it because it's my story. Just like you have a story that nobody else can share your story. And I've got boxes and notebooks and folders full of messages that I've preached through the years, and I could have gone to any one of them, but this is what I kept trying to get away from this and trying to get away from this. And the Lord wouldn't say anything else, and I knew, no, this is it. But I grew up here in Lake Charles, and long time ago. And I had a rough childhood. My parents separated when I was young, and a lot of you have been through that. That's kind of, it's pretty common. It's a shame, sad, but it's pretty common these days. And like many of you, it's a tough area to, when that happens. It's a tough part of your life. And I turned to food and music. And there's a reason they call some foods comfort foods, isn't it? Because it comforts us in our afflictions. And music, every kid can go in the back room when they're going through things and become a rock star. You know what I'm saying? Just close the door. And back then it's putting out your iPod, I guess. But back then you put the record on a turntable. Some of y'all don't even know what that is, But I turned to those things, and it was painful for me. And the more I turned to the food, the bigger I got. And with a name like Norsworthy, when I went to school, the bigger I got, they call you things like fat worthy and not worthy. And I was that kind of guy that, when they're picking the teams for, softball or baseball, when they're picking the teams for kickball or dodgeball, they get to them last couple, and you're like, well, I hope they don't pick me last. And they didn't. They waited till the end and said, oh, no, y'all can have him. Any of y'all ever been that guy? And so time went on, and I got into drugs at a very young age. I sold my first bag of pot probably when I was in the 4th or 5th grade. I don't remember which one. And I want to be accurate on these things because God cannot bless exaggerations. And my little brother started smoking pot when he was either in the 2nd or 3rd grade. And that just rocked on, and we got more and more into drugs through the next few years. And, some people are weekend warriors, and this was a daily thing for us at our house. And we thought we were Scarface, you know what I'm talking about? But really, probably more accurately, it was probably a combination of a Cheech and Chong movie combined with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, But we thought we were Scarface, Say hello to my little friend. You know what I'm talking about. Act like you hadn't seen that movie. You probably watched it last week. Retro TV. But we got more and more into drugs, pills. And I know many people have done drugs and, that's but we got more into that. Pills of all kinds, pain pills, nerve pills. Back then it was Percodan and Valium and, Xanax. All these things. Ecstasy came along. We got into that. Quaaludes or Mandrex, which is Quaaludes, sleeping pills. Now, we were kids, and we were doing all these things. But the whole time, it's to mask pain that's on the inside of you that nobody else sees. And sometimes when parents are going through things, You know, they're so wrapped up in their hurts and their pains that they don't understand that their children, their young children, have hurts and pains. There's a song by a man named Keith Green, and I've referenced this talking to some of my friends several times. And one of the lines, the song is "Make My Life a Prayer," and one of the lines in that song says, "It's so hard to see when my eyes are on me." And that's where our eyes are so much of the time, rather. But as time went on, we got deeper and deeper and deeper into these things. And eventually along comes the cocaine time. I remember the first time I did cocaine. A buddy of mine's car, he pulled out a little mirror and he busted out some lines, and I'd never done cocaine. And he chopped them up with that little razor blade, and I said, oh, well, because I was one of them all-in type of guys. You know, here we go, bailed off in it. After that, you wondered where it had been all of your life. Made you feel good. But my life spiraling. And I'm going to move through this thing because I'm talking about 50-something years in 30 minutes. But I came to the place when I was 18 years old, and my mother was very sick. She had been sick for years. And one night, it was a Friday night. It was May the 9th. And I remember going into her room, and I was arguing with her, and I was cussing at her and mad about something, and I don't even know what it was. Griping, fussing, cussing. And I left in the car and went out to party. Go and get loaded. And later on that night, my little brother's girlfriend, Megan, it was your mama, she called where I was. And she said, David, come home. It's your mom. I got in the car and I drove home fast as I could. And I pulled up in the driveway and the ambulance was pulling out. And that's the last time I ever saw my mother, was before I left. And they pronounced her later. It was after midnight, so it was the 10th. But actually, she died before that at the house in my little brother's arms. So May the 10th, they pronounced her. Funeral arrangements were made. And the next day was Sunday, May the 11th, 1986. And we buried her that Sunday, and it was Mother's Day. And Mother's Day is kind of always hard for me, even now. And my life began to spiral down further and further and further. And of course, the coke and the methamphetamine was there, and more and more and more and more. And me and my little brother, we went to a buddy of ours' house to get some coke. And actually, before that time, I went to get some coke after my mom died from the same guy. And you know, I was going to snort some coke, and he said, no, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And I'd always said, I'm not going to stick a needle in my arm. But let's do it. And I stuck a needle in my arm. And after that, I didn't want to do it any other way. So later on, as time progressed, I went and met my little brother there. We was going to do some coke. And it was down that road I told you about, Troy. I could take you to the place. I could take you to the spot today. We went in there, went into the trailer, did a hit of cocaine. I remember listening on the way to it. I was listening to an 8-track tape of Jimi Hendrix, Hear That Train A-Comin', and it's about the cocaine rush. Just jamming out, waiting to get it, anticipating. Got there, did a hit of cocaine, and right after I did that hit, I said, man, I want another hit. And I remember the guy waiting, he said, no, you need to wait a little while. I said, I don't want to wait a little while. I want another hit. So we loaded up another one, and I took me another hit, and bam, I'm out. No heartbeat, no pulse, I'm gone. And there Wayne and my little brother Brian started giving me CPR. Brian told me, he told Wayne, he said, man, we need to call an ambulance. And Wayne said, no, you ain't calling nobody. Man, when you're doing drugs like that, you ain't calling no ambulance. You ain't calling no fire department. You ain't calling no cops. If they die, you're going to drag them off in the back in a canal somewhere and leave them. And they got down there and they gave me CPR and brought me back. And I'm glad when I come to that it was my little brother that gave me the mouth-to-mouth, because if I'd have realized it had been Wayne to give me the mouth-to-mouth, I'd have died again. Oh, somebody said there ain't nobody ugliness. You ain't never seen Wayne. Hello. There's some ugly folk. At least one. And you think, well, did you stop doing drugs after that? Oh, no. Some people think folks on drugs, well, they ought to just stop. You ain't never been physically addicted to drugs then, have you? Somebody say that has never been physically dependent upon the drugs. And I spiraled down further and further and further and further. And I hated my life. And all I had was the dope to try to comfort my life. And I had different people witness to me along the way and trying to, get me to come to church with them. And of course, I was rocking and I refused. But this one would tell me this and this one would tell me that. And it was so confusing to me. And I knew, you don't have to tell nobody they're not right with God. You understand what I'm saying? We're trying to beat the hell out of people, preach the hell out of people. One man said when he was little, his parents tried to discipline the hell out of him. Then he got older and went to school, and they tried to educate the hell out of him. Hello. And they drug him to church, and they tried to preach the hell out of him. And then he got older and got in trouble and went to jail, and they tried to rehabilitate the hell out of him. He said, then come along Jesus, and he loved the hell right out of him. But these different people told me all kind of different things. And so I'm searching and I'm struggling, and I'll never forget, it was a Thursday night in February 1988. My little brother Brian, he said, David, would you come with me to see a friend of ours in DeQuincy? And I didn't want to go. I wanted to go to a pool tournament. There was something that said, do you love that more than you love your brother? I didn't know where that voice come from. And boy, there was just and I said, okay. So I went with him. The next day was a Friday. The next morning, about 10:30, at a little apartment complex on the west end of DeQuincy, in the office there, my friend's brother managed the place, and we went in, and I'll never forget. And he started talking to us about the Lord, and he wasn't just preachy guy with a suit and tie. He was sincere. And I said, listen, I want to get saved. I know I need to get right with God. This one says this one says this. I need to know what to do. And he said, David, you ain't got to do nothing. He did it all. And he opened up his Bible. And I'm sure he went to Romans and different passages in there, but he came to John chapter 3, so many of us know it. And he went to John 3:3, but then he came to John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe on him would not perish, but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him would be saved. And I saw it, and he asked me this question, and I've asked it to people through the years. Maybe you've asked it to people. He said, David, if you died right now, where would you go? And, of course, he's expecting me to say, I don't know, or I'd go to hell. But when he asked me, I said, I'd go to heaven. And it kind of shocked him, And I said, because I saw it. He paid the price for me. He paid the price for me. And I got born again. And I served the Lord with all of my heart. And I mean, I was just, man, you don't need a pulpit in a church building to preach. You understand? I mean, I was preaching at the grocery store, at the little convenience store. Man, I'll tell you what, I'd preach to anybody. Even if they didn't listen, I'd chase after them preaching to them. I wanted somebody to know about Jeremy's father-in-law, Steve. Man, you couldn't help but get around me and get preached. Hello. I wasn't born a preacher. I was born again a preacher. You understand what I'm saying? Woo! You can't shut them up. Some of you'd like to. It ain't going to happen. And so, I mean, I served the Lord through the years in every aspect of the local church. Man, the nursery, I mopped the floors. I served in the nursery, the children's church. I was a youth pastor several times. Associate pastor, even pastored for a short stint. Thank God it was a short stint. Oh, that's what they said anyway. Traveled, preaching, different churches, different states. But before that, when I was saved about a year and a half, and something tragic happened in my life. Something painful. Won't go into it. My heart was broken into a million pieces. My pastor's wife, she came to me one day. She had bought me this little refrigerator magnet. And on this little refrigerator magnet, now I'm a guy. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, I believe a man ought to look like a man. He ought to smell like a man. He ought to act like a man. He ought to be a man. That's just me, you know. But she got me this little refrigerator magnet, and on that little refrigerator magnet, it had a hummingbird and some flowers. I can still see it. But it also had this on it. It said, God will heal your broken heart if you will give him all the pieces. And oh, my broken heart needed some healing. And I hung on to that thing through the years. I'd put it on my refrigerator. Through the years, it stayed there. And I remember looking at it through the years. Always need to be reminded many times through the ups and downs. If anybody ever tells you when you get saved, all of your problems are over, you just need to slap them right then. And if you can't do it, come get me and I'll help you. I'll hold them down and let you slap them, or you can hold them down and let me slap them, or we'll go get Jeremiah or to go and get him to hold them down, and we'll all slap them. Are you listening to me? Because troubles are going to come. But oh, I'd rather go through them with Jesus than without him. He will heal your broken heart if you give him all the pieces. So I hung on to it. So I gave him all the pieces. And I hung on. And I served God. And I pressed on. But oh, there was ups and downs. And I didn't grow up faithful and learning how to be steady. My whole world was some unsteady, crazy mess. And so even when I got saved through the years in church, you know, there was this unsteadiness in my life. But God's grace, he blessed me. And I spent 2.5 years in the 9th grade. Now, I tell some people that and they think I'm joking. I spent, really less than 2.5 years because I cut out that last year. I tell people I thought I was trying to be a 9th grade teacher, so I just want to hang around and check it out a little more. Hello. I remember the 3rd year, y'all got to say, I remember the third year in 9th grade, they had moved me into some 10th grade classes, and it wasn't because I had passed them 9th grade. Mike, Miss Wilson couldn't handle me no more, brother. So they moved me into Mr. Stewart's class, and I remember one day walking there just stoned out of my mind, get in there, and I fell asleep right after I got in there on my desk. And I remember a little later, I woke up, the bell rung, I woke up and I looked around and everybody was getting up to leave and it wasn't my class. I done slept through my class and the next class. Mr. Stewart told him, he said, no, if he's sleeping, he ain't bothering nobody else. Now I got to hurry. But God blessed me. I was in 2.5 years in the 9th grade. And then later on, after I got saved, went into finance business. Thought I'd never need that math. Was in the finance business for 20 years. God blessed me. God graced me. God promoted me. And I just really did, by the grace of God. And man, I'm thankful. But man, I ended up supervising in Tulsa, right outside of Tulsa in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Had a big old house on the golf course. I don't even play golf. Snooty neighbors. Big, fine car, nice truck. Tens of thousands of dollars in the bank. 401k, all these things. Four-wheelers and toys. But I was miserable. I was closing in on 40 years old, and my only living grandmothers had died, and some spiritual people that I looked up to spiritually had passed away, and my father passed away, and I preached his funeral right there at Johnson's Funeral Home in Lake Charles. And I was so depressed, I'd be driving down the interstate in my nice car, sport car, and I'd begin to weep. And once again, spiraling down. Went through a painful divorce after 18 years. And there I was alone in that big old house. Furniture half gone, empty. The loneliest bayou in the world is by yourself. I've been there many times, just floating in my little pirogue down by yourself. And I'm there alone in that big old house and spiraled down, and some friends of mine came and they were going to help me move back to Lake Charles, some childhood friends. And they weren't my Christian buddies because all my Christian buddies didn't want anything to do with me. And so they helped me move back, and we loaded my vehicle. And I remember I had loaded my trailer. It was an open trailer with a big gate on the back of it. And I had the only thing that I had from my mother was a china cabinet, a hutch with glass in the front. And it was strapped to the back, but it wasn't secured good enough. And I went around the curve, and there went that hutch. And just like my life, it shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. And once again, I was broken. And where once I had hopes and dreams, seem like we're chasing things sometimes that don't even exist. But everything was shattered right in front of me, Eric. And I came back to Lake Charles, and I got on pain pills, and I had a bunch of money still, and I went through my money. I sold all my stuff and went through that money. Ended up working in a couple of nightclubs as a bouncer. I'm drinking, doing drugs, carousing, you understand? Doing all of it. And I'm trying to enjoy. I tried real hard to enjoy myself, but I couldn't. And all the while, I'm sitting there in the club carding people as they come in, and I could just picture the Lord holding out his arms saying, just come to me. Just come to me. But somehow or another, I just didn't see how I could. And time rocked on. And I ended up going back to work in the finance business. A friend of mine had called me from Texas, wanted me to come manage an office for him. So I did. And sometime a while after that, I was one of them functioning drug addicts at that time. You understand what I'm saying? And I ended up getting laid off with that job. And the Lord, man, he was just always holding out his arms. And I'd say, Lord, nobody loves me. I don't even love me. And he said, I love you. And I said, Lord, nobody wants me. He said, I want you. I want you. Lord, nobody believes in me anymore. Where once they did. And he said, I believe in you. Would you come to me? But I struggled with that, and I struggled with that. And I was in a little apartment over there in Beaumont, a one-bedroom apartment. Once again, in by yourself, looking at them four walls. There's more than one kind of prison. I know I've been in a couple. Are you listening to me? And I'm looking at them four walls, and I'm by myself in that little pirogue. and him trying to love me and love me. And I couldn't stand me. I hated me and I despised me. And I just couldn't see. I couldn't see how he could love me after all of those. I knew what the word said. I had notes right there in my apartment and in my storage building, boxes and notes and sermons that I had preached through the years. Preached on love, preached on forgiveness. How many times my sermons kept coming back up to me, things I shared through the years. It's not how many times you've fallen, but that you keep getting back up one more time than you've fallen. But those words kept coming back to me over and over again. When I preached them, they were true, but they were also true for me, but I couldn't somehow grasp it because it's so hard to see when my eyes are on me. It's so hard to see when your focus is on your failure instead of the Redeemer. When your focus is on how bad and hateful you've been instead of how faithful and loving he's been. It's so hard to see when my eyes are on me. But I began to go back, try to go to church, and you know, I was trying to find my way back. And I remembered something I told a friend of mine years ago. He said, I just want to go back to where I was. And the Lord prompted me years and years ago. And I told him, Steve, you can't go back, but you can go forward. And those words came ringing back to me. You can't go back, but you can go forward. And I remember laying in that bed in that little apartment communing with the Lord. And again, questioning, how can you love me? How can you want me? And y'all put it on the screen if you would, guys. He brought me to 1 John chapter 4. I was familiar with it. 1 John chapter 4, verse 16 through 18. And we've known and believed that the love that God has to us. But right here in the middle of it, it says, God is love. And he brought me right here. God is love. And then it goes on in verse 18, it says that perfect love casteth out fear, for fear has torment. And he that is fear is not made perfect in love. And I had always, I had preached that, if you walk in perfect love, heard it preached, if you walk in perfect love, it'll cast the fear out of your life, which never made sense to me. I just didn't get it, And he said, son, you're looking at this wrong. You put it back up there for me? And verse 16, put verse 16 back up there. And we have known and believed the love that God has to us. He said, when you see and understand my perfect love for you, the fear cannot remain. Light came. He brought me to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I think y'all have it, verses 4 through 8. Love is patient. Love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, is not proud. Come on, guys. Does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, is not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. Y'all keep going. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And love never fails. And I'd preached it through the years. And God said, son, you've preached it, trying to get people to walk in love. You trying to struggle. He said, but this is how I am to you. This is how he is to us. And in my struggle with that, Brother Lee talked last week about God moments. And man, I had so many during that time, but I had this God moment, and he spoke to my heart this. He said, I've never loved you any more or any less than I love you right now. My love has always remained the same. Now, that doesn't mean he was always pleased with me. There's a difference. But his love had never, ever changed. And I broke. And I came to him. come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And I came to him like the prodigal son. I love that song because it's talking about the parable where Jesus said, how many of you have sheep and one gets astray and you'll leave the 99 and go. Listen, I was the one. And he came and got me. And he loved me back to himself. And I'm laying in that bed and him telling me his love has never changed. And he said, in my will for you, my plan for you, my call on your life, he said, it's never changed. And I remember saying, God, who's going to listen to me? And he said, those that are broken, those that have been beat up by religious folks, self-righteous people. And I said, God, all of my friends are gone. And he said, I'm going to bring new relationships. And I can sit here and I can look at y'all. And I look out here at so many of you. And I'm in awe of what he's done. Would you close your eyes with me? I know time's got away from us. But so many things I'd like to share and can't right now. But the one thing that I want you to understand is no matter where you're at, there's a God and he loves you. He loves you so much, no matter where you've been and what you've done. And maybe you're in this place today and you've never been born again. You've never come to him. Everybody's at different places and everybody's story is different. And so many people quote Revelations chapter 12 and 11 that, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And they think their testimony is talking about how bad they've been. But it goes on in verse 17, it says the testimony of Jesus. Your testimony is not how bad you've been. The testimony is how good he's been. It's how much he's loved you.